This is the only morning show that matters. This is Cayman Crosstalk. Now, from Studio 2, here's Austin Harris and Jonathan Piercy.
And good morning, Cayman, and welcome back to Cayman Crosstalk's Government Friday discussion, where we begin this morning on, I think, a mammoth topic, and certainly a timely and relevant topic, given the fact that we're in Finance Committee and much is being talked about in terms of how the government spends its otherwise limited resources. This morning, we are going to engage in a discussion, one that certainly has been talked about, kicked around, and I think still is being kicked around in terms of whether or not the government needs to be in the airline business. In studios with us this morning to talk to us about the importance of the national flag carrier to the country, the economic stimulus that it provides, and its utility to the government of the Cayman Islands and the people of the Cayman Islands. We have with us in studios the Minister with responsibility for tourism, who also wears the hat of being our Deputy Premier, the Honourable Moses Kirkconnell. Likewise, joining him is the President, Chairman of the Board of Directors for the National Flag Carrier, Mr. Philip Rankin. And joining them is Mr. Norman Bodden, who himself really needs no introduction. And these gentlemen will walk us through, some of the initial areas, but predominantly, why Cayman Airways is the question that we will seek to answer with our present panelists this morning. I just want to say good morning to all three fine gentlemen. Thank you very much for agreeing to sit with us this morning, and great to have you in studios.
Morning, Austin.
Morning, Austin and Jonathan.
Jonathan, nice to see you here. First time I've been on with you as
co-host. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, Austin and Jonathan. It's also my pleasure to be here as a follow-up from yesterday, and I hope you guys got quite a eye-opener.
Oh, yeah.
By visiting us and seeing exactly what the airline entails.
Absolutely.
Well, yes, I'm going to really attempt to bite off a rather big subject. But we hope in biting it off, we can bite it off and it can be digested. In other words, we can understand what role the national flag carrier plays, how it performs that role, and why the listening audience may walk away from this conversation being better informed as to, A, does it belong in the government's utility box? Does it need to be an asset of the Cayman Islands? Or, to answer the other side of the question, maybe we need to look at, privatizing, running it as a business, to answer the other side of the question. But those are two very distinct opinions on the national flag carrier. And this morning, we hope to provide some information to those of you who may be on the fence, not quite sure which of those opinions you would otherwise support. Minister, perhaps we can start with you with the fundamental, basic question: why Cayman Airways? Why is the national airline important not only to the country, but in these rather difficult financial times, challenging financial times? Why is the national flag carrier an important utility to the government of the Cayman Islands?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Austin. Before I get started, just let me say hello to the listening public, and of course a big shout out to Cayman Bracken, Little Cayman. What we do, and I'll take this from a high-level look at tourism, friends and family, and the business of our country, of how we have to compete in the region. So, as any other business would do, you look at what you have available to you when you're trying to attract the business. And we look at what we have as competitive edges as well. So we sit in a war room, so to speak, with our group, which is the Department of Tourism, which is stakeholders, Cayman Island Tourism Association, Sister Island Tourism Association, Cayman Airways, and all of the other participants, transport, have representation and talk about how do we attract more business to the Cayman Islands, both financial and both tourism, and then, of course, the insurance policy against a hurricane and moving the population, which is also one of the mandates of Cayman Airways. So that's a standalone. You can't question that value to the country of what it does and the security it gives in moving, and it's proved itself through hurricane after hurricane for every island, let me add. So when we look at what we're trying to accomplish, every other island has sand, it has sea, it has sun. We have a competitive edge with safety and how we market that. We also have a location edge when we compare ourselves in the region, and if we're looking at the North American market, the Canadian and the American guests. how do we use the tools that we have, understanding that it's a total vertical integration of what we're trying to do to be competitive, which means that we want to capture the guests from the time they leave their house, the experience of how they get to the airport, where they come from, the plane they fly on, when they get off the plane, that we prepare. Again, this will be another conversation for another radio show, the Cayman Airport Authority, and how we get them through, how immigration works, how customs work, when they get on the outside, the taxis, and then they transfer to some of the best hotels in the world, not only in the region. But that's what we look at and we say, what's our differentiator? And it is the opinion of this government, one of the differentiators we have is Cayman Airways. And I can prove that from the standpoint of last week I was in New York at the Caribbean Ministers meeting. The premiers and ministers of tourism have a meeting yearly. One of the biggest issues that they have in trying to grow their tourism product especially is airlift. And when you look at, we are taking the view, the retail view, that if we make it easy, they will come. If we make it easier, then more will come. And we believe that we can look at the zip codes in the United States. We can look at the Canadian centers of wealth, and we can target those areas and say, how do we get lift out of those areas? Well, one is you get on a plane and you go to Atlanta, you meet with Delta, you travel all over and you go and meet with the different national airlines and talk about how do we get lift into our country. And what you'll find out when you sit and talk to the other regional leaders is that they demand subsidies, they demand seat guarantees, and these are in the millions of dollars. What happens with that is, once you pay that money to them, you don't get any local jobs out of it, you don't get pilots that are from that country, so the Caymanian pilots, the flight attendants, the whole complement, and then, of course, the multiplier effect of what this does when you have 375 employees, 90% Caymanian, working in an industry. Mm-hmm. So we're very comfortable with what Cayman Airways is doing for our tourism product, our financial industry, how we've targeted different markets, and I think that what I wanted to do was start off is to, again, try to look and see that this is a part of a very big puzzle, but it's a big part of that puzzle. And when you look at what it's done for us regionally, we have a 9% increase for the first 4 months of this year for air arrivals over last year. Last year, the yearly was 7.5% above the year before. And this is, again, using Cayman Airways strategically to control the price out of gateways, to identify the gateways that will give you the best spend, and then put the plan in place and start it and push it forward.
I need to stop for a little bit. It's 7:45 in the studio, and we need to take a time check. This time check has been brought to you by Fidelity. Hurricane season is here, and Fidelity Insurance is your best choice for protecting your home. Call Fidelity today to get a policy that fits your budget and protects the things that are most important to you. Again, it's 7:45 in the studio, and this time check has been brought to you by Fidelity. I apologize for that. Continue on. You were talking about the strategy, and so continue.
Well, if again, you're looking at the type of stakeholder that's going to be building a hotel in your country, and they are, if we take what we have now, the Westin, the Ritz, the Marriott in East End, the Reef, they all have a marketing plan and they know their target audience. Mm-hmm. When you complement that with airlift and make it easy for their target audience to get here, number one, it gives them a competitive edge. But number two, the partnering makes it less expensive for them to market the area, less expensive for Cayman Airways, and less expensive for the country itself. So again, it's breaking down the silos, it's putting everybody in the same room, it's realizing strategically that we're all in this together, and we're doing it right. I think that the results themselves prove that we competitively are doing a lot of things that are very, very being received very well by the market when you see the increases that we're having.
Thank you, Minister, for that brief summary. I think where the public sometimes draws the bit of confusion is in the statement that they believe government is asking too much of itself, and as such, perhaps maybe too much of the national flag carrier. We look at the national flag carrier as a lever for strategic tourism for the country of the Cayman Islands. And, persons say, well, on the other side, well, why is government in business? Government shouldn't be directing economic activity, but it should be facilitating. It should be, opening up opportunities so that economic activity can be developed from its citizens. And I wonder if you could perhaps share the government's viewpoint on the economic drivers that is the national flag carrier, why it's important to our overall tourism strategy, and as such, why is it also important to GDP in terms of the monies it brings in to this economy of 55,000 persons.
Thank you very much for the question. So let us say that we're sitting again and we're looking at the Cayman Islands, and they are not faring well regionally as far as the numbers and air arrivals. So we would say, what are we going to do to increase GDP for the country? What are we going to do to bring, again, more tourists, make it easier for friends and family, and our financial industry? The first thing we would do, which is one of the reasons Cayman Airways, I'm sure Mr. Norman will talk about that, was started, is we'd say, well, we need airlift. Mm-hmm. Our choice would be, how do we get our own? And the positives that come from that, or do we go and look for other carriers to bring people and control the market? I think we have the best of both worlds because we actually have both. And what we are managing to do is use them all together, because if you take the marketing mix of the hotel properties and the stakeholders, you'll realize that they depend on every airline to bring people. A perfect example of that is New York. So Cayman Airways added more flights into New York. We know that New York and Chicago are probably the two best performing tourists that come to the island as far as spend, $5,000-6,000 a week compared to an $1,800 person from some other areas. And those are the types of strategic decisions that we can make. But guess what? When they go into that area and you start seeing the turtle on the tail, other people begin to realize that it's easy to get to Cayman. So in this specific case, JetBlue put a flight in. We don't look at that as something negative. That's a very positive thing to happen for this destination, because now you have more seats in the market, more marketing money advertising Cayman, and everybody benefits from that. And then it also controls the price that they're actually charging to get the people here. So Delta is going to add a flight out of New York shortly. What happens then is strategically, we're not depending on another air carrier to say Boston has a very high degree of wealth in their citizens. Do we want to try to get customers from Boston? If we sit with the stakeholders again, and there's a commitment from the stakeholders that say we believe that one of the other gateways that we should look at for the benefit of the economy, Cayman Airways can then talk and make a strategic decision. But from the government standpoint, Cayman Airways says we can fly it, but it's going to cost $200. Cayman Airways says we can't fly it because we can't depend on what lift we're going to get. The government itself makes the decision to fly that route. And our choice then from a government is, do we go and ask another carrier to give them a seat guarantee, to give them the money to bring the people from that gateway into Cayman? Or do we sit with Cayman Airways knowing that the economic benefit for the community itself and the employment benefits and the spinover from buying the food in this country is beneficial more so than using another carrier at that point? So if it's competitive, price-wise, then Cayman Airways is the preferred carrier to continue to serve the gateway and open the gateway. But the real benefit of that purchase from Cayman Airways, which is a competitive purchase, I mean, is it more cost effective to get it from Cal, or is it cost effective to look at a different carrier to bring people?
And I guess one of the things that you're saying as well is that by having Cal fly that route, that gateway, you can also strategically ensure that the price for that travel remains competitive, because if they're not in the market, if CL isn't flying that route, then pretty much American or Delta, whatever, they can set the price point. They can say, well, you know what, the destination is now $800 or $1,000, but if Cayman Airways is providing it for $500 or $600, in order for them to remain competitive, they would have to certainly be in that price bracket.
Exactly.
So some of the things that you've touched on, and I know that many individuals have stated in terms of some of the benefits of having Cayman Airways is the level for strategic tourism and economic development. You spoke about that. The essential inter-island air bridge, the guaranteed air service independent of foreign carrier priorities, which we saw that post Ivan and even prior to Ivan, pre and post disaster relief, again Ivan, tourist evacuation, ensures a competitive fare structure from foreign carriers, you touched on it a bit, prevent foreign carrier monopolies, community support from corporate citizenship, and direct employment of some 300 plus Caymanians. So I think that so far you've laid a good argument for having Cayman Airways as part of the strategy for improving and maintaining our position in the tourism sector. Mr. Norman, if we could get you into the conversation a little bit, want to sort of give you an opportunity, sir, to speak to us a little bit about Cayman Airways and its humble beginnings, where it started from, and a bit of what went into the whole thought process of establishing a national air carrier.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. It's good to be here. And
good to have you, sir.
I'd like to have an opportunity. It is difficult to analyze the importance of Cayman Airways today if we do not consider where it came from. And I know sometimes today the younger people don't like to hear about what happened in the past. But just let me, as quickly as I possibly can, give you a bit of why government became involved in the airline business when it is widely known that most airlines lose money.
Mr. Bond, I want you to take your time. That's what we're here for.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Back in 1952, Owen Roberts Airport became operational. And in April of 1953, unfortunately, was when Caribbean International Airways with Wing Commander Owen Roberts had that accident at Palisadoes and wiped out the company officials and his crew and the majority of people. And several Caymanian families lost their lives in that accident, which was most unfortunate. But Cayman Airways then was being served with very limited service. The Cayman Islands was being served with very limited service by Lax Airlines, cargo flight C-46. In 1954, Cayman Brac, with its people, with pickaxes and a roller and a wheelbarrow, and funds from some Cayman Brac businessmen like the Fosters and Cockernals and Scotts and Tibbets, put some money into the airport there, and they got some help from Commissioner Smith and Gerard. And they built an airstrip that was 1,200 feet. Government then started looking for an airline to service Cayman Brac. And they went to BWIA, and I think they said they didn't want to get involved. They went to LAXA, and LAXA said, well, we'll start we'll put an aircraft there, and we'll put a mechanic and a crew, and we'll provide a service to Cayman Brac, and that was in 1955. And that became Cayman Brac Airways. Of course, it was served with a Cessna T-50, which was a 4-passenger aircraft, so the 1,200 feet runway was adequate. As time went on, the airstrip, the runway was extended through various efforts, and aircrafts were upgraded to a Beechcraft that carried 8, and then we had an Aero Commander, and then we had a DC-3. And we started operating service from Cayman Brac to Montego Bay with a C-45 with 8 passengers. Anyway, that was the beginning, and Cayman Brac Airways was the forerunner of Cayman Airways. Then in 1968, the government of the day, and I think the idea, as far as I can remember, came from the then Director of Civil Aviation, said, it's time for government to become involved and have some control over air services to and from and within the Cayman Islands. The mission statement of Cayman Airways in 1968 was to provide a safe, dependable air service to and from and within the Cayman Islands. And it's been in operation for 46 years, and that mission statement has been met. Nobody can dispute that. Anyway, in 1968, several things were happening why government became involved. We were building our tourism industry. We had our seamen that we had to provide dependable transportation to get them off the island to their jobs. LACSA did it before, but after Cayman Airways came, we used to do it. We also had the situation where we had to continue to provide a guaranteed service to Cayman Brac. And then we, of course, depended on it for evacuation as and when necessary. And there were times when we had to do special flights to fly people out of here either to Jamaica or the United States for medical reasons. So there were, and additionally and very important, back in the 60s, Caymanian men started being trained as pilots. And we had Captain Wilbur Thompson, we had Captain Churchill Bawden, we had Captain Dave Scott, Christopher McLaughlin, Rex Miller, and Harrison Bothwell. They were the early ones that started, and Kennedy Patton as well. And we said, you know, we need to provide jobs for these young Caymanians who, instead of taking to the seas, are taking to the air, and provide employment for them. Additionally, the government of the day, in building our tourism industry, the late Desmond Watler traveled to Trinidad with Eric Bergstrom, the director of tourism at the time, and went to BWIA, and they said, you know, we're trying to build our tourism industry and we need more seats into Cayman. BWIA said, well, you know, we'll come all the way from Piarco Airport all down through the island. We'll give you as many as we can, but we're trying to build our tourism industry ourselves. Mm-hmm. They then went to LACSA Airlines in Costa Rica, and LACSA has been a faithful air carrier in here. And they said, you know, we'll try to give you a few extra seats too, but, you know, we're trying to build our tourism in Costa Rica as well. So government of the day understood that, and that was why LACSA and government formed Cayman Airways in August of 1968 with a 49-51%.
Oh, okay.
So the airline has provided an essential service to this country for the past 46 years, and there's every justification. Anyone who believes that these number of airlines will serve the Cayman Islands because they love us and want to see our tourism develop, that's a fallacy. Because the day that the route for them to the Cayman Islands is not profitable, you will see their tail going over Northwest Point, and you will see them again. They'll withdraw their service to the Cayman Islands within 24 hours. I'm not saying they'll do it, but if it's unprofitable, they will do it. Another fallacy out there about Cayman Airways airfares should be clarified, and you touched on that very wisely, Jonathan. Cayman Airways brings a balance to controlling airfares to and from these islands. Because I'll say about our Cayman Airways air service, as I say about education, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. And if you think that Cayman Airways is expensive, let them try giving an airline a monopoly to these islands. They have classic cases throughout the Caribbean where American Airlines and other airlines have monopolies, and their fares are skyrocketed, and they give them the service that is left behind. These islands must never, ever in our history once again be totally dependent on any foreign airline to serve these islands. I think we have an essential service provided by Cayman Airways. And let me tell you, I come from the past and the present. I've only been on Cayman Airways aboard for a year. And as a past managing director and the past member of council who was responsible for the airline for 8 years, from 1984 to 92, I was extremely impressed with the professional managerial team that we have in place, that Cayman Airways has in place, we have, I think, over 200 and odd,
300
over 300 employees, 90% of which are hard-working Caymanians who are paid salaries below industrial standards, and they put in long, hard hours with little minimum recompense. And it really irks me when I see newspapers and people talking about the travel perks that they get that is subject to space, that displaces no revenue. You know, the people need to deal with the facts and tell the true story about Cayman Airways. And I'm telling you, what we have in place now is a system that is equivalent or better than any airline the size of Cayman Airways. We have a board of directors with a wide cross-section of professionals. We have a chairman of our board who is a CPA that spends long and hard hours through all hours of the night working out the finances, because let me tell you something, the financial situation in Cayman Airways today has always existed. It's always been political, which is unfortunate, but I'll tell you this, that Philip puts in a lot of extra time along with the CEO, Mr. Worms, and with Paul Tibbetts to make sure that our finances are well used and that there is little waste in the company. I'm not telling you it's perfect. Nothing is perfect. But Cayman Airways has a professional team. And another thing from the administrative end and the board functioning is one thing. But I often, when I see what the CEO has to go through today, I wonder how he copes with the amount of stress that he has to deal with. And a lot of work, you take Cayman Airways and the service for granted, but a lot of hard work goes on behind the scenes. They talk about delays. You know, which airline doesn't have delays? Anything that's mechanical can break down. But you know, one indicator of a delay is that airline is exercising very high safety measures and taking no chances. And in our crew training, we have people like Dave Scott, Captain Perry Patton, Captain Worms, and our safety and security and quality control systems that they have in place, I would put them up against any airline the size of Cayman Airways or higher.
Yes, sir.
The crew training is handled by Captain Dave Scott, our chief pilot, Captain Perry Patton. The bottom line is, Jonathan, what I found in Cayman Airways when I went in there a year ago was a hard-working, dedicated group of Caymanians who care about Cayman Airways.
Thank you very much for that, sir. And I can say that Austin and we visited yesterday and we were very impressed with what we saw. And to your point, I do believe that the CEO, Mr. Fabian Worms, is multidisciplinary, and he has to be, because when you see the various aspects of what it is that he has to do, you know, it's really not, it's no merry-go-round operation there. I can tell you that it's not an almond tree or coconut tree operation. It's a state-of-the-art, and to your point, safety is second to none, and it's always in the minds of everyone.
The conversation continues online. Your comments matter. Find all the links you need for Cayman Crosstalk at rooster101.ky. More of The Only Morning Show That Matters next.